Hello, attendees.
Good morning, everyone on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everybody on the East Coast. And in the
And
middle, it's wherever you fall,
wherever you fall. Yes.
wherever
So
you land.
we are just taking a minute for everybody to join us. And I want to get my participants list up here and see where we're at, get all my various files ready. So this is going to be an interesting webinar. Uh, as most of you know, I'm Mark Morrell, co-founder of CarriersEdge, and joined today by.
Jane Jazrawi, other co-founder of Carrier's Edge.
And we are not doing a podcast. We are
I
doing a
know, it feels like a
webinar
podcast.
that is going to kind of be like an extended, very specific version of a podcast. Because today we're going to be talking about training for owner operators. And as many of you know, we are just back from our Education and Awards Conference, the Best Fleets to Drive For Education and Awards Conference. And there we announced the winners for the year and distributed all of the results and had a great time sharing best practices and what things are happening in the industry and all of that stuff. And I'm going to make a plug here, released the Best Fleets to Drive For results book.
Put a
And
link to it from our website in the from the Best Fleets website in the
mhm,
chat. You can grab that and take a look at it.
yes. So we are going to be talking about training for owner operators, and we're going to be pulling data from that Best Fleets to Drive For program, some of the things that we know the best fleets are doing. We are going to be talking about some other things that we know are happening that we have seen sort of in the industry in general. We have a recently released course specifically on business skills for owner operators. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And we're going to share best practices from some of the other larger carriers that we know that are doing programs for owner operators to give you some ideas on how to make the most of it. So the session is being recorded. All of you will get access to the recording afterwards. There is Q&A available, and as you've seen, you can raise your hand if you have a question. Best thing to do is put the question in the Q&A. We will have time for questions, I think.
Well, you
Uh,
can ask questions as we go through. You don't have to wait to the end.
Definitely don't have to wait till the end. Yes. So, because this is coming hot on the heels of our conference, we are going to be a little bit looser than we normally are. Often, when we do this with a guest, we have a very specific set of questions that we are going to go through with them. But this is going to be a little bit looser. It's going to be a bit of a discussion about kind of what we are doing, what training owner operators need, and how to set up a program for them that is going to work most effectively. So, to begin with, let's talk a little bit about a couple of housekeeping bits that we have to go through. The first sort of part of the reason that we're doing this is that it used to be there was this kind of belief that you couldn't provide training to owner operators, that since they're independent, that they're not employees, that you can't provide any training for them without jeopardizing that independence. That does not seem to be the case anymore. Everybody seems to have figured out how to do it. In the Best Fleets program, we don't really hear that anymore. We're not really hearing people saying that they can't do training for owner operators. They pretty much are all doing something. So we're going to talk about that and some of the things that they can be doing. Um, we also have our own experiences that we've worked with some different contractor fleets and as different contractors ourselves. And we are going to wrap all of this in a massive disclaimer that everybody needs to talk to their accounting people and their legal counsel about the kind of program that is going to work for them. There are definitely things that you have to stay on top of, things that you have to be paying attention to in order to make sure that you're on the right side of the law in terms of independence. So definitely talk to your legal counsel about that and work with your accounting people on that as well in terms of tax compliance. What we are going to do is share some things that are working, talk about some things that other people are doing that have worked really well, and hopefully give you some ideas. So, I also want to acknowledge that there are a lot of different ways to engage with independent contractors. There are some fleets that are entirely owner-operator. Sometimes they have no company drivers and they're only owner-operators. Sometimes they have a mix of company drivers and owner-operators, and sometimes they have mostly company drivers, but then they also have a lease purchase plan to help people get started. So looking at the registration list just before we came in here, I think most of the fleets that are on this today have got a mix of company drivers and owner operators. So that kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility in some things, but we're going to talk about sort of all different elements of what you might be doing and what might work for you. But one of the central problems that comes up when you're training owner operators is that you really can't treat them, regardless of what the law might say. If you treat them like company drivers, it creates problems. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit. But if you treat them like company drivers, they have a tendency to act like company drivers, and that becomes a real problem. That does not lead to success for them. So you need to treat them like something different and approach them the right way. But as safety people, as risk management people, you have your own requirements. You've got to make sure that you sort of do your job. So how do you balance both of those things? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So first up, um, Jane, I want to talk a little bit about the owner operator business skills course that we put out a little while ago, and just talk a little bit about why we did that. Why did we decide to do that course? What is the background for that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons that we did it. We had one a really long time ago, and um, it was kind of in conjunction with ATBS Canada, which I don't believe exists anymore. So it got outdated and it never got updated. And what we found was that as we were going through, it was actually Best Fleets. As we were going through the Best Fleets questionnaires and interviews with all of these different fleets, we realized that people were unsure, like there was different, how do I say this quickly? Everything was all up in the air. People didn't know how to prepare people to become an owner operator. People didn't know what to do to support owner operators. People were company drivers, especially after COVID, were going crazy too because freight was really good. Everybody wanted to have their own truck and become an owner operator, and that kind of led to this flood of little companies all over. And there was a lack of information. And when you have a lack of information, then you start getting people getting angry and confused. And, when freight kind of contracted, then a lot of people going out of business. So we decided, when we see a gap in kind of the industry knowledge, we want to kind of put it in there. We had already done that.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm late. What did I miss? Everything, everything. No, we were just talking about why build the owner operator course. Um, so we decided to build it, and we are intending to build out more based on the kinds of information we see people wanting to know. So we started with how do you become an owner operator and kind of the basics, the first step. What do you have to already have in place? What is it going to take to start the business? And what is it going to look like going forward? Kind of a very high level summary of what your day to day is going to be. So that's how we approached it.
Now that's interesting that it kind of breaks out the training requirement into sort of two camps. One is to help people become owner operators so that they do it for the right reasons. And the second is what people need when they're already owner operators. And I think we can talk about each of those. But one of the things that sticks out for me is the things that I've seen kind of directly where a lot of people kind of get into it for the wrong reasons. People become owner operators for a lot of the wrong reasons. There's definitely a mythology around it. And we've heard people, have this idea that if you're an owner operator, if you own the truck, you can write your own ticket. You're all set. You're laughing. And, I have a friend who was a company driver, straight truck, but still a company driver, and had heard people say, well, you make so much more if you're an owner operator. So went and bought a truck, and it was the worst thing. It was the stupidest decision. He went bankrupt inside of a year, went back to being a company driver, and insanely, like 2 years later, went and bought another truck. And then, surprise, surprise, went bankrupt again. Not everybody, not all my friends are the smartest people in the world. Uh, so
Well, I had
there
a
are,
friend who did that too. Like that was
yeah.
not it wasn't a straight truck. It was just like a delivery. It was more of a
Mhm,
van. But it was the same thing. It's that the idea that you're going to somehow get more if you
mhm.
start your own business, that it's just going to come, the money is just going to flow more easily
Right.
from everybody's pockets to you.
And while that is ultimately the individual's decision and the individual's kind of business to manage, as a company, if you're engaging with owner operators, it's certainly in your best interest as an organization to help them have success. It doesn't do you any good if your owner operators are going bankrupt or if they can't manage their business and they're not sustaining it properly. So that ends up disrupting you a fair bit. So we know that there's a lot of existing owner operators that have sort of been cobbling together a bit of a living, but don't really understand the basics. And I think the biggest challenge that we see with this is they don't recognize that they're business owners. They don't recognize that they have to think like an entrepreneur. They have to think like they are a franchise operator, like they've bought a 7-Eleven franchise and build a business on that. The people that have that mentality tend to do a lot better than the people who don't. The other side of it, far too many of them, unfortunately, are the ones who think that they are kind of like a company driver who just happens to own their own truck. And that is a real problem. So one of the foundational things that they need on the training, one of the biggest differences on the training side is that they need to understand that they are a business and they need to get business training because these are not people, in most cases, they are not people who went to business school. They're not people with an economics degree. They're not people that are serial entrepreneurs. They're people that have probably been working as company drivers and have ambition, may have ambition about doing more and growing as a career path, or they may have been sold a bill of goods. They may have been listening to some stupid friend who told them that it's a great way to get rich. So they also, if they don't understand that, they fall into the trap of kind of operating the truck as if it belongs to someone else. They don't think about it as their means of building a business. They think about it as somebody else's truck, and if it doesn't work, I'll just get another one, or somebody will give me another one. They don't pick loads properly. They pick loads based on an incomplete understanding of what's happening, and they have a lot of misguided ideas about what it means to be an entrepreneur. So this whole idea that as an entrepreneur, you write your own ticket and then you've got all of this freedom. Well, no, when you're an entrepreneur, as we know, you're a slave to everybody. You have
Yep.
flexibility in the decisions that you make, but you don't really have freedom. You often
You're
have less
also
freedom.
responsible for
Yeah.
every decision that you make.
Yeah, you're not
And
getting
I
paid
think
vacation or sick days or any of that stuff anymore.
one of the things that I think that fleets can do to support owner operators is ask them a lot of questions about their business. I think
Absolutely.
that there's a lot of sort of like, okay, you're just kind of, you know, sorry, fleets tend to talk about their owner operators in a very similar way to their company drivers. So
Mhm.
that whole idea of an owner operator or someone who's leasing the truck kind of thinking that they're still a company driver can be partially the fleet as well, because the
Yeah.
fleet isn't making a distinction and the fleet isn't asking about what the owner operator's business plan is or what their business goals are. And talking to people about performance, we talked about this at the Best Fleets conference a couple days ago or last week, where we were talking about how fleets are not discussing performance with either their company drivers or their owner operators,
Mhm.
and discussing performance and objectives and how that business is going to communicate a couple of things. One, it's going to emphasize that you're a business, you're your own
Mhm.
business. You should not be relying, you can't be relying on us to treat you like a company driver. And also, have the fleet realize what they need to do to support those contractors. Because just like you have to support company drivers in certain things, you also have to support owner operators. So talking about miles, talking about their a fuel economy, talking about their operating ratio, like all of that is important to do. And it's almost more important to do with an owner operator than it is with a company
Well,
driver.
that brings us into kind of the difference between sort of how to approach this challenge with owner operators versus company drivers. And there's a bit of an inherent conflict there because from the safety and risk management perspective, the job is to reduce the risk profile for the fleet. And anybody that is contracted to the fleet is the responsibility of those safety and risk people. So their objective is to ensure that safety gets better, and that's their focus. But for the owner operator, you kind of need to have a different approach. Like with company drivers, it is safety. If you're working here, these are the safety expectations. You need to be doing it this way. And that works fine. They're employees, they're subject to your terms. That's all fine. But for independent people, you can't really do that because then you get into too much control, exerting too much control over them. But also, it's kind of unnecessary if you approach it the right way. If you approach it very differently in terms of we require this from the business or we need you to do this, like as a business owner, it's in your best interest to do this, then it tends to work a lot better. You can have those conversations about miles and or about safety or fuel efficiency. All of those things, instead of just being sort of abstract safety things, are very directly revenue and profitability discussions. And that is a whole different approach. So let's talk a little bit about what you put into that course, a bit of the rundown of what's in there and why those things are kind of important. You talked about earlier on about people wanting to become owner operators or needing to understand how to become an owner operator, and also sort of the people that are already owner operators. And I think one of the challenges that a lot of the people that are already owner ops don't really understand the things that they should have been thinking about before becoming it. So, what is sort of the high points of what's in that course that are really relevant here?
Well, I'm going to gloss over the first two. There's three lessons in the course. The first, and you can take them either all together or you can do them individually. So the first one is setting up your business, and that's like, do you want to actually run a business? That is, what kind of business do you want to do? Are you going to be able to actually succeed? And this is one of the things that the best fleets do that is very important is they require a certain amount of mastery of safety and like sort of the basics of operating your vehicle before you can be if you before you can do a lease with a carrier. So it's kind of do you have what it takes? Is this something that you can stomach? Can you stomach going without because you have to pay for this and this and this? Can you manage your money? Can you handle a budget? And then we talk about all the different types of businesses that you can. So, what are these different operators? What's the difference between an owner operator and a lease purchase operator? And then talking about um, if you want to buy your own truck, then what do you have to do? And if you're going to a bank, then you should have a business plan. You should figure out your business structure. Is that going to be, um, are you are you going to be a sole proprietor? Are you gonna self-incorporate, that kind of thing? And then think about vehicle costs, which has been a big issue over the last couple of years because vehicle costs have skyrocketed, actually sort of since COVID. And it looks like they're going to be even more, like it's going to go up with the tariff situation happening. So what can you stomach? There are probably going to be fewer owner operators coming into the market now, I think, just because of vehicle costs. And then the other startup costs that you have. So if you registration, permits, and all of that stuff that you have to budget for. So
And
that
also, sort of along with that, that kind of gets to the fundamental understanding of the difference between fixed and variable costs. Like, so you're talking about sort of the fixed costs that have to be considered at the beginning and understanding that there are differences in those.
Right. Yeah, we have a whole section on fixed and variable costs, and it's just something, one of the things that we found was kind of interesting about this topic was the hidden costs. There's just a lot of costs. If you're going across the border, then there are other costs that you have to deal with on, one side of the border and then the other. If you're in the US, there's different costs, and they're not all very upfront. And that's
Mm,
why we wanted to basically make a big list. And there's a lot of owner operator sites. So people who are owner operators who make that list because other people say, what do you need to do to be an owner
mhm,
operator? I don't know what to do. And if
right.
you are a fleet who has people who might be interested in being an owner operator, you may not have a lease purchase program or anything like that. But if you have people, if you are hiring owner operators, it might be a good idea to actually have the pathway to becoming an owner operator somewhere on your site as a recruiting tool. You may not have those drivers come to you right away, but what you're going to do is if you give them that information that you know that you have in your business, and this is kind of the beginnings of coaching, and say, hey, you want to be an owner operator and come and work for us? Well, here's what you need to do. Here's the kinds of things that we're looking for. These are the things that, that we're going to provide for you. These are the things that you're going to provide for yourself. And drivers are very happy to get that kind of information, and they will come back to you later because you have given them valuable information. There's a lot of the best fleets that will do these kinds of things, like post blog stories or have things on their website that explain to drivers, future drivers, not current or even nearly hired drivers, but people that you intend to that you may want to get in the future, give them some information now. It's not going to do anything to, it's only going to benefit you
Mm. Yeah, that's a
as a
good angle.
recruiting tool.
And I think one side of that as well is that probably there's a bunch of current owner operators that are going to look through that and say, oh, I didn't know that. So people don't understand a lot of the ins and outs, and they struggle with things like IFTA and figuring out how much should be in some sort of maintenance savings account. And like these are challenges that you have to think about and kind of go through all of that and think about, should you even really be an owner operator? Like, do you really want to deal with all of this stuff? Or would it be safer and easier to just be a company driver? I mean, you pointed out before we started this when we were prepping that there's always a boom. When freight rates are high, there's a boom in people becoming owner operators. When spot market is high, you get a bunch of people want to be owner operators. And then when it's soft, all of a sudden they sell the truck and they want to be a company driver. Well, those people probably should have never been owner operators in the first place. So part of the training that they need is understanding all of those pieces, understanding the tax and accounting side of it, right? So when we look at where the gaps are and the stuff that uh, the sort of the best fleets, but also our customers that are doing this really well, where they're having success is providing a lot of that kind of financial understanding. It's almost like a business school light kind of approach. And through that, the bizarre thing is that once people understand the importance of how all of these things fit together, once they understand their numbers, all of a sudden they're a whole lot safer as drivers because they realize the impact of one out of service. They realize the impact of one crash and certainly understand the impact of fuel usage, like and excess wear and tear on brakes and tires. Like that stuff they don't really care about that much when they're driving somebody else's truck. But when they have to pay for those brakes and tires, all of a sudden it becomes very important. So the people that have a really good understanding of the numbers tend to be safer. They tend to have more success as safer drivers, which is
Well, I
what the
think
fleet wants too.
that comes down to stress.
Hmm.
So you're not, and there was an article I think it was CCJ about stress, where if someone is if someone is more stressed, they're going to be a higher risk as a driver behind the wheel.
Hmm.
So if you're worried about money, that's I mean that's like number one stress.
Hmm.
So you want to mitigate that stress and then some of your risk is mitigated as well because you're not distracted by thoughts of doom. You're not distracted by trying to figure out, what when you're going to get, the money to pay for X, Y, and Z. You can sort of relax and and I think what's really important, especially for owner operators, is that, okay, I know what's going to happen, the predictability. And that's really important in any business. So I know that I'm going to get this much at this point. I'm going to have this much money and I'm going to be able to pay these bills. I'm going to be able to put this into my escrow. I'm going to be able to, pay for my insurance or whatever it is. And then, but it's predictable. And the
Mhm.
more predictable it is for people, the more that they relax.
And that kind of leads into one of the things that we've seen fleets doing very successfully as part of onboarding is that it isn't just when you get onboarded with a new fleet, you go through the safety, you go and meet the operations people, and you learn about dispatch process, and then you get sent out on the road. It is a review of a business plan. It's what do you need in order to be here? And there is generally what I've seen for fleets that are having a lot of success with this, as part of the onboarding, there is a little bit of coaching around that. There is a bit of a discussion, and that becomes sort of part of the assessment for the fleet. Like, is this somebody who's going to be successful here? Do they understand their cost structure? Do they understand how much revenue they need to make? Maybe they're not going to be a good fit here. Maybe there's no way that this owner op is going to be able to work within the freight mix that we have.
I
And
think it's like how realistic are these
mhm,
people? Like, do they have so for your friend, I think the idea was, well, I'm just going to make lots of money. And
mhm,
it's not very realistic. When you have someone who is serious as a business owner, they have some idea of what they can make or what they should be making and what
mhm,
their costs are. And and have everything organized. You know when you're having a discussion with an organized business owner as opposed to someone who doesn't know what's going on.
yeah.
And you want to stay away from the people who really don't have they really don't have the background for what they're trying to
Mhm.
do.
So that kind of supplements all of the regular safety stuff that people want uh, owner operators to take, the same as they have company drivers take. But it's kind of an extra layer of business management and coaching that sort of goes along with it. And it's definitely a huge, huge gap within the industry and very important. There's a couple of other ones that you'd mentioned when we were talking about this before. And one that I thought was really interesting, you mentioned emotional intelligence, and it got me thinking about leadership stuff. And that was kind of a different angle, but it really is a good point because if these are small business operators, ultimately they're going to want those businesses to grow. They are certainly going to have to interact with other people and do that in a way that is most productive, most effective for them. So there's a real benefit to them understanding kind of leadership styles. If you're a business owner, the more leadership skills you have, the better off. So emotional intelligence, leadership styles, understanding how different communication styles work, how to get the most out of people is kind of like negotiating and communication. Like that's it was a great idea. And I hadn't really thought of it until you mentioned it, but it
Well, to
seems really important.
To tell you the truth, I don't think anybody else has thought of it because we have these courses in our library. So it's not part of the owner operator course itself, but it is another course in our library that's available to anyone who has owner operators. You can
Hmm.
offer it. And I think emotional intelligence is a really good one to start with because it gives you a sense of how to be a better communicator. It's not a communication course, but it is the building blocks of communication because you have to anticipate how what you say or what you communicate is going to be interpreted. And I think there's a lot of drivers who have a difficult time with that because that's not what they're trained to do. They're
Hmm.
not, so you drive, you're by yourself. You basically might see the customer and you might have just a really transactional, here's my paperwork, okay, thanks, and then you go off like you don't really have a relationship with them. And so you do need to have a basis of how to talk to people, especially when people are being belligerent with you, or if you're trying to convince somebody of something. So if you're trying to get a loan, like how do you present yourself? How do you speak? And I think emotional intelligence is a really good basis for that. Leadership skills is, even though leadership skills kind of assumes a management position, it's still good for an owner as well because you also have to have leadership. I mean, you have to make
Mhm.
decisions. You have to decide how you're going to approach a problem. And I think this is also something that um, drivers and like it's not even on the radar.
Mhm.
And it would definitely be a benefit to them.
Yeah,
I
that's a
kind
good point.
I kind
Yeah.
of want to go back to the hard skills, um, because those are the first two lessons in our course, which is really financing, getting your truck, managing your money, doing all the regulatory stuff. And that is what you do to get set up. And so emotional intelligence and leadership, this is something that you can offer owner operators they are after they're working for a while. So
Mhm.
give them a little bit of extra, this is something that people do, that business leaders do all the time. Like these are the kinds of courses that are good for business. And what we'd like to do is actually start building that out, not necessarily in the soft skills kind of thing, but in the hard skills as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really interesting because you're talking about this, and I can see that there's a real difference between the company driver and the owner operator in that the company driver may have a fairly small network of interests or other people that they connect with. And it's maybe the driver manager, it's somebody in the shop, somebody in payroll. They may have a couple of customers, maybe a few fellow drivers, a fairly small contained group that is all within the organization. Whereas the owner operator has all of that plus a network of suppliers that they're going to have to rely on in order to build their business. If they are taking loads from a load board or something like that, they've got customers of their own. They've got a much broader network of contacts that they have to maintain and they want to have success with. So having those skills built up is really important. And it kind of leads into one of the other things that I saw when I was looking through some of the best fleets data, that what some of the fleets are doing that works really well is recognize that you don't have to necessarily provide all of this internally, that there's a lot of other sources of this information. So whether it is your insurance company that is offering information about the industry, I see some fleets that are starting to have their owner operators go to conferences. And if you think about it, industry leaders, if you're a business owner, or if you're a safety and risk person, you're going to these industry conferences to learn what's happening in the industry and better your business. Well, the owner operator is in the same situation. And as a company, maybe you're not paying them for their time and paying their travel, but you can make it easier for them to attend. You can route them in such a way that they can have the opportunity to attend these things and learn from them. I mean, we had last week, we had drivers and owner operators that were at our Best Fleets conference because the fleets are recognizing that there's value in it for them. So going to these things can be really useful for the owner operator because it starts to get them thinking about the business as a business owner and get them out of that mentality of I'm just a company driver who owns a truck. And so that's really what you want to get.
I
Um,
think in that vein, I don't know if you want to talk about coaching yet.
yeah, we could lead into that. I was actually just going to go into that sort of the differences between onboarding. We talked a little bit about, how you kind of need to do a bit of a different onboarding program for owner operators, but ongoing training and mentoring and coaching comes along with that as well. Um, an excellent question. Do you have a class on how to set them up and what paperwork or information needs to be completed correctly? Do we talk about that in the owner op course?
We do talk about what they need from
Yeah.
from a paperwork standpoint. We don't talk about necessarily how to run their own safety programs, just for like, and that's something I think that we could do. But we do talk about um, hang on.
Yeah, we do talk about that. I think we don't get into a lot of specifics because it's going to be different depending on exactly where they are. So we sort of cover it at a broad level and what's required, but there are a number of different things that may be different depending on the jurisdiction. So we would cover some of those in the course, and then we would probably refer them to one of our consultant partners for the specifics on how to get set up. Um, so, yeah, so in terms of coaching, yes, so you need to do something different onboarding and need to do something different in terms of ongoing, and coaching looks different as well. And
Oh,
I find,
actually, going back to that, we do have a document that I can send to you or I can send out that is part of the course, but just a list of
mm,
everything
mm,
for both Canada and the United States. So if you're interested in that, then we can definitely send that out. The
yeah, we'll
problem
include that.
is, if you wanted to do do you want Canada, US, both?
We'll send out both. We'll send out
Okay.
both to all attendees.
All right.
Yes.
Um, the problem it, is that there is so much.
Yeah.
There is a lot. And, you could go through every single bit of everything like CVOR, NSC, the IFTA, IRP. Like you could just do acronym hell for a long time, but it's actually more beneficial to just have it all in one place and just have the list of here's the garbage you need that you need to get through. You need to fill out this, you need to fill out this. And then just have it in one place in one resource. That's one of the things that I found. Now, I didn't write the course. Anastasia wrote this course, but I was reviewing it, and as I was reviewing it, I was looking at all of the different places to get information, and it's scattered. It is everywhere. And the place that I found the most concise area of where someone can get all the information was from an owner operator. Not a
Somebody who
carrier.
had
It was
already
an
done it.
owner operator. It was
Yeah.
another owner operator. And so WIDA and OBAC, like those kinds of resources are really good because they know what small businesses need. When you're in a larger business, you've got multiple people who can worry about all of these different things. When you're a sole proprietor or you're just by yourself in your business running your truck, it's you. And you have to be everybody. You have to be chief bottle washer as well as your in-house lawyer, your in-house accountant, your in-house like you're just doing everything. So having a resource in one place is extremely important. And that's one of the value of having the course. But I think what we were talking about, kind of switching is the coaching aspect of it because for an owner operator, you are a fleet. Because I don't know if anyone is what everybody is, but a fleet is a huge resource to an owner operator. The fleet is running the same business that the owner operator is.
Mhm.
So whatever insights that you have, and I will tell you that as a small business, I would have loved to have a big brother business kind of running parallel to me and giving me guidance on what I should be doing. Wouldn't
Mhm.
you say that, Mark? Wouldn't
Oh,
that be
100%.
lovely?
That would have been fantastic. Yes.
We didn't have that. But owner operator, you have such an opportunity to provide guidance,
Mhm.
guidance like a mentor, exactly. So set up those mentorships either with staff or with a fellow owner operator is enormously valuable because it's not, you don't it's an ongoing thing. You want to be talking to people on an ongoing basis to see how you're performing, how you can better perform, what other options are available to me. And you don't have to do this, like, this is not employee stuff. This is advising another business. And if you approach it that way, that is hugely valuable to owner operators.
I want to just reiterate that because I think that's an exceptional point that the owner operator and the fleet, the owner operator and the carrier are in the same business, and the difference is scale. The owner operator is one truck, two truck, maybe four trucks that are leased on to the carrier, and the carrier may be hundreds. But a lot of times, those fleets started as an owner operator with one truck. There's a lot of these companies that we know that started with one truck and grew the business. And the owner operator is ideally attempting to do the same thing. They may not ever aspire to have 500 trucks. They may be happy with one or two. That's perfectly fine, but it is still the same business. So the mentoring from the office staff to the owner operator on how to manage the finances, what to watch for, how to set yourself up for success, how to be prepared for surprises and shocks and downturns and all of those kind of things, immensely valuable, immensely valuable. And so you also mentioned the owner ops mentoring each other. And that's something that I see when I look at the best fleets data and I see, when people have got kind of coaching programs, we have a question where we talk about coaching or mentoring. On the company driver side, usually it is what you would call sort of practical coaching. It is a senior driver saying, here's how to do this turn better. Here's how to back into the spot better. It is much more about the applied practice of driving. Whereas the owner operator fleets, it's a different approach. It's owner operator to owner operator, and it's more of a mentoring on how to have success in the business, how to pick the right freight, to pick the right load, what kind of tires are going to work better and why, and sort of tips that are learned over the years of running the business. But like I said at the beginning, when it's approached that way, it ends up having the same sort of outcome in terms of safety anyway, because if they understand the business benefit of these things, they are going to be much safer. So it's a very different approach, but it kind of ends up having the same outcome in that you end up with a safer fleet of, more productive owner operators.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think that providing training is one thing. And I say this about everything, that the training is kind of the knowledge base.
Mhm.
So we can provide online training for, the daily things that you're going to have to keep in mind, what you have to do to get set up. But that ongoing relationship with the fleet or with another owner
Mhm.
is going to give people a lot more opportunity to explore that information, to sort of say, well, I don't understand this, or can you explain this to me, or how can I improve my miles or my mileage, or all of these questions that we can't provide in a course.
Mhm.
What those things are best provided in one-to-one discussions. So having scheduled updates with owner operators is a real boon for them.
That kind of leads into one of the things we want to talk about is how to set this up and how people are doing it and having success. And what you're talking about leads into a great example of uh, what we've seen that works really well, which is it's not really much of an industry secret. So we're not telling tales out of school here. Some people, I won't mention company names, but somewhere it's pretty widely known, I will. And this particular one is Landstar, and they have a great program called CABS, Course of Advanced Business Skills. Well, I've changed it called that. I've called it Course of Advanced Business and Safety, but it is a 1 or 2 day program that all contractors are required to go through. It's spelled out in the contract that they have to attend this once every 3 years, and it is a review of business plans and a review of safety, and it goes through those things specifically for each individual contractor. So they each have a business plan that they work on with their, what do they call it? Their driver
Like a
business
business
leader.
advisor.
Yeah, which is like a business leader who runs through that with them and sets up the plan and they review it. And this is sort of reviewing that plan and updating it and working safety into that as well. And it's been a very successful program for them. They've had it for, I mean, more than 10 years now, probably 15 or more years they've been running that. And it's kind of baked into the contract that this is part of the requirement. And all the contractors go through it. It's not considered to be, it's not really directed training like what you would have with company drivers. It is a business review kind of meeting. And through that, they're able to work in some safety and some business skills and coaching and all of the things that they need, and it works really well for them.
The other thing that Landstar does, and they're not the only ones who do this, like many of the current best fleets, including the overall winner, is acts as a networking. So basically the owner operator has the fleet has all of these connections to accounting services, legal advice,
Mhm.
investment planning, like all kinds of different services that they are not necessarily not they're not even necessarily customers of, but they know them. So they have this network and they allow the owner operators to access that network. So they will refer if there's a legal issue, then the fleet will refer to legal counsel or have some sort of plan that the owner operator can buy into. But
Mhm.
they act as kind of, they have the web and the owner operator can access parts of that web if they need it, which is, I think, one of the things that I found from the driver survey is that owner operators, the two big things that they want are legal services and financial services. Those
Mhm.
are their two big stressors. And if
Mhm.
you can provide them some assistance with that, you don't have to do anything necessarily
Mhm.
for them, just be a referral service. But that will give them that gives them a
Mhm.
lot of support.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it kind of redefines the question of what training do owner operators need as how can you help educate the owner operator to have the most success financially and in terms of safety performance with the fleet. And it doesn't, like I said earlier, doesn't need to be a specific course that you build and deliver or that you source and deliver. It can come from other places. And sometimes the best education they're going to get is by having a meeting with some outside service and yeah, you may not need to pay anything. It may just be here's contact info. Here's contact info for an owner operator who's been in a similar situation. Here is a legal service that we know is reliable. Here's an accounting service that specializes in doing work with this segment. Those things can be hugely beneficial and really help them to build out their skills.
And I think it's important so now there's like all of these things that you could do.
Hmm.
You could have them go through training, you can do coaching, you can give them services, but really, what do your owner operators want? And I think it's really important to give them a voice.
Hmm.
Our contractor fleets, the ones who are in the top 20, all do that. So there's owner operator committees. You can ask operators what they need the most and sort of prioritize it. But getting feedback from owner operators is extremely important. And I
Hmm.
think kind of harp on this all the time. But if you want to know what to focus on, ask people what you want or what they want you to focus
Hmm.
on.
Where
So
their issues are.
what is going to be the number one thing that your owner operators are going to want from you? And right now it's more miles, I'll tell you
Hmm.
that. They
Hmm.
they want more, obviously want more income, but they also want better communication. So if you start by asking them how you can better communicate with owner operators, they'll tell you.
Hmm.
They're not gonna, they want to get the job done. They
Yeah.
want to get out there and make money. They don't want to sit around in meetings, but they will if they think that they can get something out of it.
Mhm. Let's shift gears a little bit because I am watching the clock a little bit here, and I do want to talk about a couple more examples of how people have done this. And we've talked very broadly about the importance of finance and it's sort of putting everything through the lens of finance, which is absolutely the right way of doing it. And one of the biggest challenges, though, is always how do you get people to do something that you want them to do when you can't control them like you can control employees. And there are ways around it. And there's a couple of ways around it that have been proven to work pretty well. And the first is to focus on outcomes rather than activities. So instead of saying, we want you to take a defensive driving course, you can instead say, we require you to have a safety program that includes regular training. And you can do it however you like, but it has to include this kind of thing. It has to include these sorts of elements to it, and it needs to be completed on a particular schedule. You can figure it out however you want, but it needs to be done. And sort of I think we see people that will talk about it in terms of you can't be dispatched until you demonstrate or you prove that you have completed those things or that you are meeting the requirement. And then the next step is, well, you as an owner operator can figure out how you're going to meet that requirement on your own, but we've put together this program that actually meets the requirement and it's available there, and you can just go for it if you want. 99% of them are just going to pick that option. So they end up doing the thing that you want them to do. There'll be a few that want to go and put together their own thing, and that's fine as long as they meet the requirement. That's the key thing. So the important part is to think about outcomes rather than activity. So this is what we want to get. We want to have people that have demonstrated that they've completed training. How they do that is on their own. We want to have people that are always safe, that have no more than this number of violations, no more than this, no more than that. Um, so we want to make sure that we have all of that stuff accomplished. However they do it is their business. So question, when we get the recording, Q&A be attached? I believe so. Yes. Yes, the Q&A, I believe, is included with that. The recording certainly covers us answering the questions as well. Um, and then the important distinction about outcomes versus activity really allows you the cover to say, you can do it however you want, but here's a way that we know works. And most people will end up just taking that. And as a great example, what I look at is FedEx, which is probably the largest, or got to be close to the largest owner-operator fleet on the continent. They've got several tens of thousands of trucks on the road that are all independent contractors. And that's how their safety program works. All contractors are required to have a safety program that includes a certain amount of training for all of the drivers on a monthly or quarterly basis. And FedEx
Mark,
says,
sorry to
yes.
interrupt. There's a question. Kimberly has a question.
Yeah, Kimberly, can you just type it into the field there? And then we can answer it in line. So yes, FedEx requires people to have that, requires all their contractors to have those programs. And what FedEx has also done is gone and find a couple of vendors that will create programs that meet those requirements. So the contractors actually have a couple of choices. They can pick one or the other and choose whichever one they like, and then go for it. And as long as they're doing what's included in that, then they're all set. FedEx is happy. The contractors are happy. FedEx doesn't have issues with independence because they're saying you have to pick, you have to go and have a program that has something. You can either pick one of ours or go and build your own. Nobody has time to go and build their own. They're just going to pick from one of the lists that is included. They're just going to pick something there, and it works really well. The other thing that some companies do that works nicely on top of that is incentives. So we will say, for people that have completed certain training programs, maybe there is an additional discount available in the shop. We've seen that work pretty well. You know, people that demonstrate that they're training, that they're doing the training, that they're staying on top of things, will get a discount on their parts purchase. And if you don't have that, then we assume that you're not following best practices, you're not staying trained, so we're not going to give you those discounts. And that's perfectly within, well, it seems to be, and again, going back to my earlier disclaimer, seems to be well within the realm of legality because a lot of very large and very public fleets are doing those kind of programs. That can work very well. Set it up as objective based, make it easy for people to fulfill those objectives by picking something that is already configured. And as long as it's spelled out in the contract that they should be doing certain things and that they are required as part of their contract in order to get dispatched, they're required to do a couple of things, then you're in good shape.
This is a good question.
The cameras. Yes.
Oh, the cameras.
Yes. Cameras are
Yes,
pretty
the
much the
answer is
default.
yes.
Absolutely. It's part of the contract. And actually, I had a conversation with Prime about this last week because they have not only forward facing, but they have in-cab facing cameras as well. And they communicated it fine. They don't have any real pushback from their thousands of owner operators. It is about communication. It is about how you're positioning it. And something like a camera for an owner operator, it just saves their butt. If you're a business owner, you want that insurance that if you have an issue, like an owner operator that doesn't have a camera, if somebody hits them, if you see one of these staged accidents or something that isn't their fault, they're basically done for. Like if you were an owner operator, if I was an owner operator, I would be eager to have that camera immediately, like from day
I
one.
I think that it's important to a couple of things. If you can, give them a choice. If you're going to require them to put in a camera, give them some ownership of that. Because one of the things that we saw in the Best Fleets driver surveys is that they're okay. Owner operators are okay with the technology. They do not like being told what to do.
Yeah.
They want to be involved in the choice.
Mhm.
They want to have some sort of control. And if your owner operators are kind of not happy about cameras, it's not hard to get a good sales pitch. I mean, like Mark said, one collision, I mean, that's a huge amount of money that you're kind of preventing a lawsuit,
Yeah.
before it even starts because it showed that someone rammed into your trailer.
Well, and if it was an accident that even was not at fault, but with litigation being what it was, and we just had a lawyer at our conference last week talking about they basically want to pull those trucks out of service while litigation is happening, and like that's deadly for an owner operator. So the camera that can help, that can have footage that helps to exonerate them, or even if it doesn't exonerate them, and it allows the insurance or the litigators to settle the claim quickly, it's well worth it. It's well worth that.
It's one of the few pieces of technology that drivers have really accepted
Mhm.
very easily. When we see, I mean, even now, drivers complain about the amount of tech in the truck, and when ELDs came in, it was really bad. But
Yeah.
cameras, not a, it's not a, it hasn't been an issue.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, Absolutely. And we're
This
pretty
is a,
much out of
yeah.
time on this, so I need to sort of bring this sort of wrapping it up. But this is excellent, good questions
Yeah, thank
coming
you.
in. So you'll all get the recording. And next month, our session, we are still finalizing it. It's going to be with one of our partners, and we will have more details on that in the next few days. So stay tuned, but we will provide the recording and Jane's one pager on all the different things that need to be done for owner operators. So thank you. Excellent. We will be
Thank you
hyping
very much
this.
for coming
Yes.
and the questions. That would be great.
Yes. Okay. So I think that wraps us up. Thanks, everybody.